Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Ides of Oberon. Welcome to the festival season. We're all traveling festival. And as your host here, I am on the middle of a bus trip across country. And at the same time, due to the modern technology, we're able to talk to Oberon Zell himself. Good day, Oberon. And
Hi, David.
and
So
we're going to
you're
do
on the road now, huh? Okay.
absolutely. Well, this is a very busy time for all of us. This festival season is one of the most important times. And how are you changing? How do you see the season? How do you see festival season? First of all, can you do a lot of festival work?
I do. I've done a lot of festival work for a very long time. This year will be the 40th Starwood, and I've attended all of them except the first couple, I think. So I've been, and many, many other festivals. Good Lord, the number of festivals is more than I can barely keep track of. It just lots and lots and lots. And I think the festivals are one of the most important things that create a pagan community. Before there was festivals, the little groups would just do their own thing, and they didn't have much interaction with others, with other groups, and there wasn't any real relationship. But the festival movement has brought us into that kind of proximity, and I really feel this is the essence of ancient paganism, was the festivals, the big markets and the annual festivals that came around at the wheel of the year, when everybody would gather and they would meet each other. It would be, you'd meet people that you might strike up romance with, could be future, mates and families, as well as trading. There would be lots of trading going on. And that's just a very important thing, the marketplace, the festivals. And we're doing this. This past year has been very strange, of course, as we've been having to do them all with Zoom. But some of them now are beginning to come around live. This year, I'll be going to Starwood. It'll be the first festival I'll be appearing at live this year, and that's in July. A month from today, actually, is when it's happening. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'll be doing my next Ides of Oberon on the 15th, as of every month, from Starwood, and that should be interesting. It'll be a live show from one of the oldest and largest pagan festivals. And there's more to come. I'll be going to, I just did by Zoom, the Pagan Unity Festival, which has been a live one and will be in the future. So I did a couple of workshops at that, and I'll be doing Hex Fest in New Orleans. I'll be showing up there in person. And then come the fall, I'll be doing several more. It just goes on and on. So that's it. My life is now getting back into festivals, but I've rather enjoyed this time off because I've been able to get a lot of work done on writing books, which is really my very important job.
I can see that. Well, how do you think this has changed this last year? Because I'm seeing the festivals, the ones that are going live, are understaffed and underutilized. The numbers are small. There's still a lot of panic out there. I'm even reconsidering doing any more after this festival. I'm reconsidering doing any other festivals this year, desperately because of the lack of, because people are staying away from them this year, at least they have so far. What do you think is going to need to bring people back to festivals?
I haven't been to any yet, as I said. I will be the first, so it will be my first experience of what that looks like as far as the attendance is concerned. And I really have no idea, but it is interesting that we have all compensated for the inability to meet in person over the past year by developing an entire new culture around these Zoom gatherings and conferences. And I think that's really fascinating. We've been able to take advantage of the technology to keep us ahead of the game. And we're doing that. And eventually, this kind of technology will take us a lot further because it's global. We can be talking to people anywhere in the world. We don't have to fly around. We don't have to travel. We don't have to take any of the risks and chances involved in travel, whatever they may be. But it's not the same. That's the thing, is that I think there was something really important about hanging out with people, sitting around the campfire and sharing stories and stuff, which we can't really do that. this way. This way we have a focused period of presentation, we've each got our talking heads up on the screen, but we're not hanging out with each other, we're not sharing meals, we're not sharing conversation, we're not sharing music, we're not sharing companionship, and we're certainly not sharing nookie. So, it's really not the same, but it's what it is, and we'll see how it develops. Paganism, if anything, has been a religion of constant evolution and change and keeping up with the shifts. I remember when we shifted from printed publications to internet, when the internet became the thing and everything went digital and electronic, where now it all is. So this too shall be a new thing. I'm not hearing anything here from you if you're talking. Not hearing a word.
All right, we'll try this again. I've noticed that most of the festivals I've seen are mostly older pagans, and that the majority of younger pagans do not have a desire or even an interest to go to festivals a lot of times. I've noticed that they prefer to go to conferences. They prefer more indoor type of items. They prefer more controlled environments such as cabins. And the two reasons I hear, one is it's very expensive to do festivals these days. So the amount of cost of camping equipment and all the storage and all of that is just out of the means of most millennials now due to the change in the economies. And the second thing is that they prefer more controlled environments. And do you think that's going to really affect how some of the older Star would work? I mean, Puff was actually not a festival, but a conference for all practical purposes. And the way they held it was indoors.
Well, certainly, Pantheacon had been the major indoor festival for a very long time, 25 years, until it finally ended last year. Just before the COVID outbreak was the final Pantheacon, and it came apart for totally different reasons, social reasons and cultural reasons, but not really because of logistics in that sense. It was extremely successful, but it's a lot more expensive to attend a hotel conferences than it is to go to a camp out. And I'm really not sure about that. In the past couple of years, when I was on Walkabout, I attended a lot of festivals in person because I would just drive from one to another. And I didn't really notice that there was predominantly older pagans. It seemed to me to be, a lot more younger, really, from kids to through 20s and stuff. So I'm not sure if what you're saying is fits with my observations in the events I've been to, but we probably haven't been to the same events very often, except we've both been to Starwood.
No. So
I guess we'll have
we're
to
going to move on.
I'm
So I've noticed that a lot more people are talking about grade schools come up recently, and people want to understand what is the purpose behind grade school? Not just what does it do? We all know it teaches magic, but what's the real purpose behind it? What is its goal? Does it have a goal, an intention?
Well, yes, it does, actually. I do have a secret agenda, which it's not all that secret because I talk about it a lot, but I want to unleash a vast number of trained practitioners into the world who know stuff. I mean, it's a school of magical studies, and we've got over 500 classes, and everything is there. And I think that there has been, as the community has expanded exponentially, it's just grown to be enormous. There's a lot of people at the edges of it that haven't been around that much. They haven't gotten that much training. They haven't had a chance to acquire much knowledge. They've mostly picked up what they know from talking to friends and what they find on YouTube. I don't even know how popular books are, although I guess they must be okay because the booksellers seem to be staying in business. But well, anyway, that was the point. The point was to unleash a whole contingent of trained wizards out into the world who'll be able to teach others and to carry the work and be the responsible people, the people to go to, people who know the stuff. That's the idea. Oh, and of course, to transcend any of the boundaries created by different traditions and paths and religious considerations, because the grade school is secular. It's not a religious school. It's not associated with any particular church or group. Certainly, most of the teachers and most of the students are pagan, but that's not a requirement. We've had, students. We've had Christian and Jewish and even Muslim students. Our second graduate was a Sufi Muslim. So I rather think that that's an important part of it too, because wizardry is not a religion. It's a practice. Being a wizard is like being a professor or a doctor or something. That doesn't identify your religion. It identifies your practice and your skill set. There's things you're expected to know, because people come to you for advice and counsel. That's what it's all about.
Good. So the question that follows up, someone has been asked, when should you start teaching your children magic? When should you be teaching them informally and formally?
Really, as soon as they're born, you start with whatever, as long as whatever they're doing, put, hang magical toys from over the bassinet that you put them into. I did that. There's not a moment of my children's lives that we were not suffusing with magic, in one way or another, even if it was just symbols and stuff, But I was rather surprised, actually, when I started getting out of the immediate Church of All Worlds community that I'd been developing in St. Louis back in the 60s, and made my first trip across the country to visit other pagan groups. And I was stunned to discover that none of them were involving their kids. At that time, it was all witchcraft, and all the witchcraft groups it was more like a secret society. It was like having a meeting of the, Masons or your occult society club or something, and it was not a thing to have the kids involved in. So they would get a babysitter to watch the kids while they had their meetings. And they certainly didn't teach the kids anything. Most of them were saying, well, I don't want to indoctrinate my kids with anything. I'll let them grow up and figure it out for themselves, which of course meant that the entire information they were receiving was from others, often quite inimical to our values, because they weren't at all shy about trying to indoctrinate their kids and the neighbor kids as well. So that was quite a shock. But we saw, I think that in those days, back in the late 60s and 70s, the witchcraft contingent of people did not really see it as a religion. They saw it as as an occult society, a secret society. And we were looking at it, the Church of All Worlds, and some of the other pagan groups that we were connecting with on the West Coast, like Farah Ferry and Church of Eternal Source, we were looking at as a religion that includes the whole community. In your typical archetypal metaphor of the witch, the village witch, she would be an old lady, widow lady with her little cottage at the edge of town and her herb garden, but she wasn't a religious practitioner. She wasn't conducting ceremonies for the community or anything like that. She was the person people would go to for advice and counsel, mostly women, but she certainly would not be seen as a religious figure, which would say, compared to, say, the Druids, who were definitely religious figures in the community. So we've been kind of having to wrestle with these things over the years, to figure out who we are and what we're all about. But I think I have a pretty clear idea. I feel that this is a religious movement, and religion is what you do in community. Religion is not what you do all by yourself. That's spirituality. What you do all by yourself, your own little relationship with divinity, your personal devotions, that's fine. That's spirituality, but it's not religion. Religion is what you do with others in community. And festivals are quintessentially that.
So that we talk about children, as you've noted before, that the pagan and Wiccan communities, individually and collectively, are growing at a rapid pace. But what we're seeing now is that it's by far exceeding the number of teachers that are available. And so how do people deal with that? Because we're seeing a lot of gatekeeping. We're seeing more books than ever. There's more than a book a day coming out now. We're really in like the midst of a revival in a golden age, or whatever way you want to phrase it. But I'm seeing more and more of the teachers, especially older teachers, are accusing the youngers of not understanding anything or not paying attention. So what we can do about kind of holding this movement together as it's growing so rapidly? They'll probably add another 500,000 people within the next year.
Oh, easily, yes. We've the estimates right now, the most reasonable estimates, some of them are really outrageous, but mostly by the Christians, but the most reasonable estimates from the responsible survey people like, religion organizations.org surveys, that kind of stuff, are looking at around 4 million people right now in America. Globally, it's almost impossible because most people don't take into account the huge global movement of people to reclaim their traditional pagan heritages in many, many cultures and many, many people. They're everywhere. Practically every country has got a strong movement now of people reclaiming their pagan heritage. But in America specifically, the self-identified pagan community is clearly in the neighborhood of 4 million and growing rapidly. It's considered right now officially to be the second largest religious faith group in America after Christianity, which of course is huge. But currently, the figures over the last couple of decades for Christians have been plummeting. They've been losing numbers at about 1.1% a year. And the latest survey that came out in February of this year had it down to 57% of people identifying as Christian. And that's stunning. It really is. But as far as the teaching and all, well, we have schools. You guys have a school. You have the Witch School, and it seems to be doing well. And we have the Gray School. And there's lots of other schools where teachers are, in fact, actually teaching. And presumably, the students are showing up to learn what they have to teach. So, and as you pointed out, books are coming out at a constant rate. I've written 3 of them just in the past year. I'm really been enjoying this writer's retreat time out from festivals to get some work done.
Oh, yeah, we actually teach a very tiny fraction. After all the schools online are actually teaching a very small fraction of the actual amount of students that are coming. You're getting a lot of people who are more movement type people. And that growth is phenomenal. So we're going to go ahead and now, thank you, people. So we're going to list it. So other than Oberon Zell himself, what is your favorite authors and your favorite books?
You're asking me? My favorite author was Terry Pratchett by far, although followed closely by Jim Butcher with the Dresden Files and other stuff like that. And I've got lots of authors I like, but I'd put Terry Pratchett at the top of my list.
Okay. So that's the house out. If you were to recommend a book for someone starting out in paganism, what book would it be? Or do you have a book that you recommend?
Well, if I'm trying to get somebody interested in Terry Pratchett, which will take them a long way because he wrote over 70 books before he died of Alzheimer's, I would definitely start them just with a whole genre with Small Gods, which is probably the most brilliant theological treatise I've ever encountered. Absolutely stunning. And it's kind of apart from the rest, so it stands alone, whereas the rest of the books follow sequentially. Characters are introduced and things happen, and it continues on in the Discworld series. But Small Gods stands alone, and I would really recommend it. If somebody really wants to learn what it means to really become a witch in the classical sense, I can't think of any better recommendation than Terry Pratchett's Tiffany Aching series that starts off with We Free Men and goes to A Hatful of Sky and a bunch of others. And the very last book in that series was also his final book of his life, and that was called The Shepherd's Crown. And that one takes place, it's kind of the Harry Potter sort of books, except it's so much better than Harry Potter, which just doesn't even compare. It's real stuff. It's real witchcraft. It's real magic. And the protagonist, Tiffany Aching, you first encounter her when she's 11. And then each of the succeeding stories, each of them takes place 2 years later. So You meet her at 11 and 13 and 15, 17, and finally 19. And it's amazing series, just absolutely fabulous. What I find astonishing is when I talk about Terry Pratchett in our community, I get two reactions. Some people go, oh, yes, of course, absolutely. Oh, Terry Pratchett, that rocks, man. I mean, he's got a bunch of movies out, all these books. He's won more awards than any other author. He's published more books than any author. He's the second largest published author in the world, right behind J.K. Rowling, of course. And the other reaction I'll get from people is they go, huh, never heard of him. And I find it astonishing that there can be pagans who have not heard of Terry Pratchett. How is that even possible? He is the foremost pagan author ever. Everybody should be familiar with him.
Actually, I've never read a Terry Pratchett book. I've read one, and I never read another. I found it's interesting. It's not my style, but it's interesting. I find that true of almost anything. There are people out there in the world who don't, very few. I think one of the things I think people don't understand is how few people are actually reached at any given time. We have 7.6 billion, and only a very tiny, any one of us only affects a tiny amount. Even the best named authors still only reach a small amount of people overall. Even J.K. Rowling's, right, hasn't reached 1 billion books yet. So there's a limit to where we communicate, I think, sometimes. So, and moving into this, so the question I also had, it says, again, another children's question. And the question, let me read this. Okay. How do you relate? This is a grandparent question. How do you relate to your grandchildren when your children don't really want them, know that you're a witch? A lot of grandparents now, we're really seeing a lot of grandparents whose children do not want them, being weird around their kids and things of that nature. And it's a hard piece, but how would you advise those grandparents?
Well, I don't know. I only have one grandchild, and that's Morning Glory's daughter's daughter, who is totally raised in this and is totally into it. In fact, she's now a teenager, and she is totally immersed in Morning Glory and her lore and stuff. She's become probably an acolyte of Morning Glory. Maybe her daughter. Sorry, I'm talking. Okay, the granddaughter's name is Alessa, and the Morning Glory's daughter's name is Rainbow. So Rainbow was totally suffused in all this stuff and totally grew up with it. And when she had a daughter, she passed it on through and continues. And Alessa is, Gail says that she thinks she's in Morning Glory's reincarnation because she has so embraced it. But I remember the very first time that little Alyssa was old enough to go for her first trick-or-treating. And so I got this great little picture of her. Of course, she was dressed up as a little witchlet. And it's been that way ever since. So they keep an altar, and they're not active in the pagan community the same way that Morning Glory and I have been, but they still embrace all the teachings and wisdom and philosophy and perspectives and stuff, and we have a wonderful relationship. And that's my only experience. So with a grandchild, I really don't have any other. My son died without having any kids, and the other kids I've raised. Haven't. Well, Wolf's daughter has two kids, and they're totally pagan, and they're really wonderful. But I only met them briefly, because they're down in Dallas, and I'm not. So, in any case, in our family, as near as I can tell, what of it there is, that's a hard one to answer. But I would say that there has been a tradition of these kind of stuff skipping a generation. How many of the old stories used to be that people would get their initiation or their teaching not from their mother but from their grandmother, and that's the way of going. And it's always been kind of a granny thing. Especially the witchy stuff has been very granny oriented. It's practically a granny religion. The old wives' tales they talk about, that stuff. So that may be appropriate. But as for having a fight with a mother of your grandchildren who is opposed to the practice, I don't know what to make of that. If you raised them, what went wrong there? This is your kid. you know. I don't know how to deal with that.
That goes back to one of the first questions we had was about, I said it was one of the first pieces we were talking about, the idea of it. So we're going to take this in a different direction. You attended the last Parliament on World Religions. It got actually kind of very interesting in the differences in the point of view of how paganism is seen at the Parliament and how it's seen in the community. And now we're going into the first virtual Parliament, and we're starting to see some of that energy again focused. So are you going to be participating this year or attempting to? The virtual
Yes,
Parliament of World
definitely.
Religion, October 16th, 17th. And what do you see?
I proposed a workshop and I proposed a panel. Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. For me, it's a very different thing. So I was curious on your feelings about that. So we have two more questions. One question is, as a wizard, do you have favorite colors or ways of doing color magic? Okay, Zelly. Yeah, she's about maybe 9. And that's a good question. She wants to know about color magic. Do you practice color magic?
No, I do on many levels, but I'm not sure I can. I mean, if I was just talking about my favorite color, that would be green. But when when I sign my name and sign books and stuff, I always use purple ink. But that's not really the magic colors. The Gray School has 16 departments, all color coded with a distinctive color related to the type of magic that's involved, such as, well, green for herbalism and blue for healing and yellow for divination and red for alchemy. It goes on down the line. These are traditional colors that can be traced back with their own history. But if you're doing specific type magic with color, then you want to align with the colors associated, say, with the days of the week or with the type of working you're trying to do. So, and these are, what kind of candle you want to burn, what color altar cloth do you want to put on, what color tabard, because you're trying to align the work in a particular direction. So you want to pile up all the similar stuff with the correspondence of similarities. So the colors come into that. So if I'm, trying to work with, whatever it may be, say if I'm working with animals, the color associated with that is brown. So it'd be, doing a lot of stuff with brown. If I'm working with herbs, the color is green. So I'm not quite sure how to answer the question because I'm not sure what the question exactly is. But of course, there are colors associated with magic. And like I say, we utilize 16 of them in the Gray School.
That makes sense. So this is the last question. People are asking, there's festivals for pagans and there's conferences for witches and everything else. But do magicians and wizards have a conference or a festival that if people want to attend to, are they?
There are. The ones that are probably for the forefront are the ones that go on in Vegas that are put on by the Vegas Vortex people and the Desert Moon Circles. And since they have a number of very well-known wizards in the community there, probably the whom best known is Jeff Mcbride, because he's also known from many pagan festivals he's attended, as well as being a headliner for Caesar's Palace. And they are specific conferences for wizards and magicians. And the Mysterium is one of the best. And Fire Dance is another one. And Fire Dance elements are now being brought into other festivals. There will be special devotions of that. So, there is. And of course, we have the Grey Council, and the Grey Council is a council of wizards.
Mm-hmm. So, all right. And so with that, where can people find your stuff? How can they get a hold of you? And I've even had one of the questions that popped up the last minute is how do we get you out? How would a store get you to come out to an event? And I know you're cutting back on some of the events because you want to produce more books. But so how can people find your books and your materials? And of course, the Millennial Gaia.
Well, I'm not that hard to find. Just Google me, and I pop up all over the place. I have a personal website that shows up if you Google me, oberonzell.com. I've got, I've got the school. I've got the Church of All Worlds. I've got, I'm Be Reached by Green Egg. If you put my name into a search in Amazon, you'll find all my books will turn up, and the contact information is there. My email address is public. I always tell people what it is, even on Facebook, and I'm on Facebook. Oberon Zell, Facebook. Right there. It's I'm not that hard to find. My email address is oberon@mcn.org. I mean, I know some people may be a little bit more difficult to get a hold of, but I don't think I'm one of them. And I read all my email. It's a little hard to keep up with now the many, many things that people are using to communicate with, because I don't have time to review them all. I check my email fairly regularly, but Facebook, I check maybe once a day. So if people are using Facebook to message me, they may be wondering why I'm not responding, and it's because I don't have time to read all the Facebook messages that come in on several different types of platforms, and text messages that I get, and lots of stuff. But I do the best I can. I do try to keep up with it. I try to answer queries and respond to people sending me stuff. But the best way to reach me is really email, because that I'm addressing. And the best thing about email is that I can easily attach something. So if somebody asks me a question, I can just flip on an attachment and send it right back. Reply easy. I don't have to write up something for it. And then I can do it on my laptop keyboard, which is a lot bigger than the keyboard on my phone, which is a little harder to type without getting my fingers hitting 2 or 3 keys at a time.
We just have a couple of more minutes for today. Is there any last thoughts you'd like to convey? Anything that you think that you're thinking about? What's on top of your mind? What is it that you're kind of thinking about these days? Is the last piece for the evening? What's inside Oberon's head? What do you see contemplating?
Well, things that are on my mind include, getting my living space improved and more functional. I've been kind of marginal on that, almost couch surfing. I've been staying in a guest room in a very lovely place, but I need to get my own space together. So I'm working on that, and more books right now. My big book project, I'm wrapping up on the book called Goodbye Jesus, I've Gone Home to Mother, which is an anthology of essays from various pagans who were ex-Christians about their journey from Christianity to paganism. And I've written all the material that is in the introductory and the appendices and all that stuff. So right now, we're just simply collecting essays, which we invite up to 2,000 words, and editing them, and then figuring out how to arrange them sequentially. So that's a fun project, which I've kind of had in the back of my mind for over 20 years now, since it first came up in a hot tub long ago, of how did people get here, how did people find their way? And I'm particularly interested in stories from ex-Christian clergy, which I've got a number, and ex-nuns, which are really interesting stories. So there's that. And then I'm working right now also with John Sulak, who was the person who collected all the interviews for Morning Glory's my autobiography, The Wizard and the Witch. And we are now preparing to put out the full original material, about which half was cut for the published version. Even then, it's a fat book because there was just so much. So now my new publisher that I'm working with, Black Moon, wants to do a 2-volume set and include all of the stuff that was trimmed out of it. So this will be a massive undertaking to have a director's cut version. So I'm going through it all. I'm making sure that all the stuff that I want to have is in there, and that's a lot of fun. What we're looking at is something like about 35 chapters that were originally written, and additional material that was left out even in the early stages. So I'm just finishing up the 2nd and 3rd chapters right now, which I'm combining or breaking apart. So anyway, so those are some of my immediate projects. I've got a couple of art projects and designs out there that I've been doing, and those will show up, and I'm going to be looking forward to having my booth and display at Starwood with what I've got now. The Millennial Gaia is expanding. We now have several different sizes. We've got a little tiny 4-inch size, which is really cute, absolutely exquisitely perfect for your small altar or car dashboard. You can have a Gaia on the dashboard, as well as bigger sizes. In addition to the original 8-inch, we now have a 14-inch and a 24-inch. And the next size up that we're shooting for, which I really look forward to, will be life size. We've got a lot of people who have been begging for a life size garden statue. So I'm working with that stuff too. And yeah, that's that. I think that covers the main stuff pretty well. Bringing everything else up to speed, getting my Patreon updated, getting my website updated.
Absolutely.
Working with Green Egg, all that stuff just goes on.
So we'll be back. So thank you, Oberon. And next month we're going to be on the road again. Hopefully we'll be in a much more secure position. Thank you for everybody. Sorry for the delay, and we're going to be doing this next month from Wisteria, the Festival of Starwood. And so blessed be everybody, and thank you.
And good night, and see you next month from Starwood.